Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. For those of you who are watching me for the very first time, my name is James Ambroise, and on this channel we cover how to pay off debt faster than any other debt repayment method out there. We cover basic bookkeeping and accounting for someone who just started out a small business. We cover basic personal income tax to include a Schedule C, Schedule E, depreciation. I am also the author creator of Ambroise Method 1.0 and Ambroise Method 2.0. Ambroise Method is a revolutionary debt repayment method that offers greater results in terms of reducing interest cost compared to debt snowball, debt avalanche, velocity banking. Real quick about my credentials, I have been or am a bookkeeper and accountant, QuickBooks Pro advisor, senior tax advisor, residential real estate investor, residential property manager, financial coach. And as always, before we get started with what's on the board, please allow me to shout out the name Jesus, my Lord, my God, my Creator. Thank you. All right, America. On my last case study, I talked about how the higher APR does not always translate to higher interest cost. In other words, just because an account has a high APR, that doesn't mean that that same account or that same debt has a high interest cost. Okay? So a higher APR does not always translate to higher interest cost. And we're gonna prove that here today. Okay? Today we're doing case study number 20. And today's date is August 16th. So August 16, 2025. Alright, America, I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to start with the exercise. Alright, America, and again, I'm gonna try to show you guys that the higher APR does not always translate to higher interest cost. All right, on the board, America, we have debt number 1, debt number 2. So we're gonna try to compare these two. Down below, we have debt number 3, debt number 4. So we're gonna try to compare these two. So comparing this one with that one. Okay, so for debt number 1, 10,000 bucks, the APR 10%. For debt number 2, 10,000 bucks, the APR 9.98%. So over here we have a higher or bigger APR than we do over here. Okay, 10% is higher or bigger than 9.98%. Okay, so 10%. This column here gonna represent the APR converted to a daily. Okay, so this column here is the average daily balance. This is the number of days, 28, 29, 30, 31. This is the interest cost, 77, 79, 82, 85. Same thing down below, the interest rate, 24%. The interest rate converted to a daily rate. The average daily balance, the number of days, 28, 29, 30, 31. And the interest cost for the cycle. Day number 4, interest rate, 23.68. The average on the daily periodic rate, the average daily balance, the number of days, and the interest cost for the cycle, the interest cost for the month. Okay. Now, over here, to save time, I'm gonna do 1 over here. Same thing, I'm gonna do one over here. Same thing, I'm gonna cover only one. Over here, we're gonna cover only one to save time. Okay. Over here, we're gonna start day number 28. Over here, we're gonna cover day number 29. Over here, we're gonna cover day number 30. Over here, we're gonna cover day number 31. That way, I do every single days in the cycle, because the cycles typically have 28 days, 29 days, 30, 31 days. Okay. Now, all these lenders are using an average daily balance, including new transaction with compounding America. Let's assume, so let's cover day number 28, number of days in the cycle. This one, let's do the one, let's cover one of them, and we're going to cover day number 28. Now, these folks over here, before we could get to the average daily balance, when you have a lender that's using an average daily balance, including new transaction with compounding, let's cover the compounding aspect. That is, for lack of better term, America, interest added on top of interest. So let's do that one real quick. So with compounding, so let's assume we started out with a balance of 10,000. Okay. Which was the previous day balance. So with compounding, and let's assume we do not have any new transactions. So no purchases, no advance or credit. So no income coming in, no expenses going out. So no new transactions. Okay. So this one at 10%, let's see what the daily would be. So it'll be 10%, 10,000 times 10%. Divided by 365. Okay. So we'll be at $2.74. It's 2.739, and I'm writing up. So we are 2.74. This $2.74 of interest will be added on top of the balance the following day. Okay, and again, we're assuming we did not have any new transaction. So the following day, the balance will be 10,000 plus this new interest, $2.74. So now we'll be at $10,002.74. Okay. Then you'll do again 10% divided by 365. Okay. So 10,000. This time we are again at 2.74. Again, we're just covering the compounding aspects. Okay. The following day, again, let's assume we did not have any new transaction. So now it's gonna be the 10,002.74 plus an additional $2.74. So 10,000. So on the following day, we'll be at 10,005.48. As you could see, America, when we're using an average daily balance, including new transaction with compounding, the balance keeps ballooning up. It keeps going. It goes from 10,000 to 10,000,274 to 10,000,057.48. See, it keeps adding up. That's the effect of this compounding. That's the effect of the compounding. Okay, when they're using average daily balance, including new transaction with compounding. See, it went from 10 to 10,002.74 to 10,005.48. Meanwhile, if they were not using compounding, you would have stayed 10,000. You would have said $10,000 throughout. You would have stayed 10,000. On day 2, 10,000. On day 3, 10,000. And again, assuming we did not have any new transactions. Okay? This one doesn't say 10,000. 10,000, then $10,002.74, then $10,005.48, and so on and so forth. Okay. And again, assuming that we did not have any new transactions, that means no income comes and no expenses goes out. Okay. So no purchases, no payments or credits. All right, folks, that's the compounding aspects. So when they're compounding daily, this particular lender is using, I'm going to need a little bit of room. So on the compounding aspect, so this one's using 365. Okay. So that's the one that's being added every single, that's the interest cost that's being added every single day. Okay. Now, and you're going to add all these balances, okay, for however how many days. And then the way they arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle is going to be the APR converted to a daily. So now APR converted. So remember we are 10%. So 10%, 10 divided by 100 divided by 365. So that's how we arrive at 0.0002739.726. So they also, the APR converted, they're also using 365. Okay. So for this one, we're just gonna put on the board 365, 365. As far as the day count. Okay, and we're gonna get to that maybe a little later in the lesson if I remember. Okay. So let's do at least one of them. So we have the APR converted to a daily times the average daily balance times the number of days in a cycle. So APR converted to a daily, so we're over here. So this number times this number times this number. Let me double check my math, making sure I did not make any mistakes. So 10%, 10 divided by 100 divided by 365 times the average daily, 10039.82 times the number of days times 28. 77,017, 77,002 because I'm rounding up. Okay, so my number is perfect. So as far as our results, so far so good. Did not make any mistake. Now let's move over to this column. This one, same thing. Under compounding aspects, you know, to where you arrive at the interest cost for every single day, they're doing 365 just like this one. So we're gonna put down 365. Okay. Now the APR converted This one was APR converted to a daily. This one is the APR converted to a monthly. So here they're using the daily periodic rate, or DPR. Over here, they're going to be using a monthly periodic rate. So it's the APR converted to a monthly, not a daily, but a monthly periodic rate. So the APR is 9.90%, 9.90%, 9.90 divided by 100 divided by 12. That's how we arrive at, so this one's going to be divided by 12. That's how we arrive at 0.00825. See? This one's converting the APR to a daily rate. This one over here, I like to break it down all the way through, so that's why I do divide it by 100. This one's the APR converted to a monthly periodic rate. Let me put that on the board a little bigger. Monthly periodic rate. Now I do it all the way through, so I did divide it by 100. This one is daily periodic rate. You see that, America? One lender using the daily periodic rate on how they arrive as part of the formula on how they arrive at the interest cost for the cycle. Another lender going to be using a monthly periodic rate. So the APR converted to a monthly periodic rate. So 9.90 divided by 100, because I like to do it all the way through, divided by 12. That's how we arrive at 0.0825. So now, since they have already converted the APR to a monthly periodic rate, times the average daily balance. This is the average. We're doing number 29 days for this one. So it's going to be this number times that number. I'm sorry, this number times this number. Okay. Over here, it's three numbers. So it's this one times this one times the number of days. Over here, because they're using a monthly periodic rate, they're not going to take into account the number of days in the cycle. So the number of days doesn't matter for these folks when they're using that formula. So it's going to be 9.90 converted to a monthly periodic rate. So 9.90 divided by 100 divided by 12. So we are at 0.00825 times the average daily balance. 100. We're doing for 29 days. So 40.79. 8283.6, 82836, so I'm writing up 8284, 8284. So, America, this lender here that's using a monthly periodic rate, they do not care how many days you have in a cycle. Whether the cycle is 28 days, whether the cycle is 29 days, whether the cycle is 30 days, whether the cycle is 31 days. Okay? When they're trying to figure out the average daily balance, they take into account how many days in the cycle. But when they're trying to figure out the interest cost, they completely ignore the cycle. Because to them, since they're doing divided by 12, to them, every cycle They're treating every cycle as if he has 30 days. When they're using a monthly periodic rate. So on the compounding aspect, they're using 365 days. But when they're converting, they're using 360 days because they're doing divided by 12. So which means like every month has 30 days for them. You see that, America? So you could count, refer to that one as 30 days. Since they don't care how many, what's the number of days, how many days the cycle has, they're gonna use a flat 30 days. Or you could refer to it as 360. And again, 30 times 12 is 360. Okay. Because of all these numbers that are flying around, okay, we refer to it internally, America. Because we're always trying to find out what the compounding aspects is. So we refer to that one as 365. And again, internally, folks, okay? That's how we refer to it. Because we're always trying to figure out our average first. So that's why this number is the first number for us. Because remember, for the average, you have to add all your balances for how many number of days. Since that number comes first, for us internally, we use the compounding number. If it's a lender using an average daily balance, including new transaction with compounded, whatever number that they use, whatever day count that they use internally, that's the number that we use first. You know, externally, they might be using something different. I'm just telling you internally how we do it. Okay? So 365, which is the compounding aspects, what formula that they use. And for this one, $30. We could refer to it as 12, as 30, as 360. Okay, internally. Okay? This number let us know exactly how they arrive at the interest cost for the cycle. Okay? Now, externally, they might refer to the day count as 30, 365. See? The order is slightly different. Our order is 365, 30. There's 330, 365, or they might refer to it as 365, 60, 360. Okay? So, and again, folks, internally, this is how we refer to it because since the compounding comes in first for us, when we're trying to figure out our average, okay, we use whatever day count for the compounding aspects first, and then when we're trying to figure out the actual interest cost, okay, then we use the other number. Okay, internally, that's how we do it. All right, folks. So now going over the results. Let's take a look at the average daily balance over here. 1003982. 1003942. So we got 3982, 3942. So the average here is bigger. Let's just put a B for bigger. 1004120, 10040, 79. So if we compare an apples to apples, 28 days, 29 days. 4120 is bigger than 40. 4258 is bigger than 4215. 1004396 is bigger than 1004352. So over here, everything is bigger on the average side. Now, America, let's take a look at the interest cost. 7702, 82, 83. So the interest cost over here is bigger. So the interest cost over here is smaller. 77, 79, 78, 82. So that's bigger. 82.54, 82.85. That's still bigger. 85.30, 82.86. So this one is smaller. So we got bigger, 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 smaller. Over here we have smaller, 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 bigger. You see that, America? So, between two separate lenders, 10,000 here, 10,000 there. So we're trying to have an apples to apples comparison. On the average daily balance, this is a bigger interest rate. Naturally, the average daily balance is bigger on that side. So the average is smaller on this side. But the interest cost, America, is smaller at least 3 places, bigger for 3 places, then bigger, then smaller. So an account, America, could have a higher APR, but that account, that debt produces a smaller interest cost. At least 3 places here. Smaller, 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 bigger. Bigger, bigger. Bigger, 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 smaller. So, if they were using the same formula, the higher APR will always have a higher interest cost. But because these two lenders are using different formulas, one doing a 365 days, while internally we refer to that one as 365, 365. This one doing a 365, 360. So this one using a different formula for the day count. And again, folks, a higher APR, you would think will produce a higher interest cost. The higher APR produces a smaller interest cost. And again, 7702 is smaller than 8283. 7978 is smaller than 8284. 8254 is smaller than 8285. 8530 is bigger than 8286. Okay? So on the 31 days, number of days in the cycle, this one ended up being bigger. Okay? See? For this, between those two, the formula are all over the place. They're not even, there's not even some form of consistency. Smaller, 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 bigger. It should have been smaller all the way throughout, but it's not. It's smaller, 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 bigger. This one is bigger, 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 smaller. And again, folks, today we're trying to figure out why the higher APR does not translate to higher interest cost. Higher APR, smaller interest cost. So higher APR is not higher interest cost, at least for 3 places. This one, a smaller APR has a higher interest cost, at least for 3 places. And again, 10% is bigger than 9.90%, or 9.90% is smaller than 10%. So the smaller APR produces a bigger interest cost. 8283 is bigger than 7702. Okay? if we compare them for the same number of days. And again, folks, between two lenders, for example, one lender in their cycle might be, let's say their cycle is 29 days. Another lender might have a different cycle, okay? But, say for example, this lender, their cycle might be 30 days, okay? Between two lenders, they don't always have the same number of days in their cycle. I'm talking about, say right now we're in August. That August for them, well, let's use February or something. February for them might have 28 days, but for this one, that's always using 30 days. February for them will have 30 days when they're trying to arrive at the interest cost for the cycle. So one cycle might have 28. Well, let's assume whatever same number of days we have in the calendar year was, because the cycle, remember, the cycle doesn't always have to be the same number of days in the cycle. Doesn't have to be the same number of days in the actual calendar month. Okay, well, that's another topic for another day. Okay, but let's assume we're in March. Let's say that March has 29 days in that cycle, and for this lender and this other lender, their cycle might have 30 days, something totally different. Okay, but since we're doing apples to apples, since we're having an apples to apples comparison, so we're comparing 28 days with 28 days, 29 days with 29 days, 30 days with 30 days, 31 days with 31 days. Okay, but again, between two lenders, the cycle doesn't necessarily have to be the same. Okay, so that is the difference, America, because those different lenders are using different formula on how they arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle. Now, doesn't even have to be different lenders. It could be the same lender using different formula. Because you got some lenders for one type of product, they're doing one formula. I'm talking about the same lender, lender A. For one product, they're probably using this formula. For another product, they're probably using that formula. The same lender might be using different formula, depends on the different product. Okay? For example, we have some consumer product, for lack of better terms, and we have commercial product, consumer loan or commercial loans. Okay? Doesn't have to be loans, but, and again, folks, the same lender might have different formula, depends on what type of product that they are offering. Okay, so that was comparing debt number 1 with debt number 2. Now let's move down to debt number 3 and debt number 4. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing. Okay, so over here for the compounding aspect, okay, because internally that's how we're trying to remember those things, because there's too many different day count flying around. For the compounding aspect, they're using 365 over here. So same thing, if we started out at 10,000, so it'll be 10,000 times 10% divided by 365. I think we had like $2.74 or something, if I remember right. Yeah, let me run it one more time. 10,000 times, oh, this one is 24%. 10,000 times 24% divided by 365. So here we'll be at $6.57. Let's round up, $6.58. Okay. And that's $6.50. 10,000 times 24%, 365. Okay. That one on the compounding aspect, 10,000 plus 658. So on the following day, again, assuming we did not have any new transaction, this one will balloon out to 10,006.58. Okay. So you went from 10,000 to 10,006.58. Meanwhile, we didn't even have any new transactions. Again, folks, that is the compounding aspects. Okay. So the previous day balance, you have to add that interest on the previous day balance. Okay, let's assume this 10,000 was the previous day balance. Okay, and same thing, it's gonna be on the following day. It's gonna be this time 10,006.58 times 24% divided by 365. Okay, so that'll be another number. Okay, so and again, the number keep growing. That 10,000 keep getting bigger. That's the compounding aspect. For lack of a better term, that's like interest on top of interest. Okay. Now, so for the compounding, these folks using 365. Let me put down below. Okay. So they're gonna add all these balances for however how many number of days divided by the number of days in a cycle. And the APR converted to this one, the APR converted to a daily. So 24% divided by 100 divided by 365. So we are at 0.0006575,342. Okay. So this one using 365, just like that one. Okay, let's put it a little higher here. 365. Okay. All right. So we did say we're gonna do number 30 here, day number 30 here. So it's the APR converted to a daily times the average daily balance times the number of days in a cycle. So let me double check my numbers. 24 divided by 100 divided by 365 times the average daily balance. We're doing day number 30. So 10,002.57, 10,102.57 times the number of days times 30 days. Sure enough, 199.28, 199.28. So my number is perfect. Okay. Now, remember between that number 3 and that number 4, these two lenders are using different formula. This time, this lender using 360. So that one would be 10,000 on the compounding aspects now. So 365 for this one, 365. And down below we got 365, 365. So this is number 1, this is number 3. Okay. Over here, that number 2, they were doing 365, and the APR converted to a daily. We're going to call it internally 12/30/360 internally. So 2, debt number 4. Okay, so for them you'll be 10,000 times 2368. Divided by 360. 10,000 times 23.68% divided by 100 divided by 360. So we're at 6.58. Just like that one. And that's 6.58 on the following days. Let's assume we did not have any new transactions. Okay. 10,000 plus 658 going to become $10,006.58 times the interest, times the daily interest again. We're going to keep adding all of them for however how many number of days. Okay. Now, that's on the compounding aspect. So in the compounding aspect, they're using for over here 360 when you're compounding it daily. Now, the APR converted to a daily, 23.68 divided by 100 divided by 360, 0.000657778. So on the APR converted to a daily, they're also using a 360. You see that? So internally, we refer to that one as 360. 360. Internally, whatever number we're using first for the compounding aspects, that's the number we listed first. And whatever number we're using to arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle, that's the number we're using second. Okay? So now we say we're going to do day number 31 over here. So it's the APR converted to a daily times the average daily balance. So 23.68 divided by 360 times the average daily balance, which is 10,105.94, 10,105.94, 10,105 times the number of days in a cycle times 31 days. So now we're at 206.07. So my number is perfect. Okay. So now let's compare the average daily balance. That number 3 has a higher APR, 24%. This is the average. 100.95.91, 100.95.94. This one, $10,095.91, $10,095.94. Over here is smaller. 10,095.91, 95.91 is smaller than 95.94. So here is bigger. Let's do for day number 29, 99.24, 99.28. Smaller again. 102.57, 10.102.57, 10.102.61. Still bigger over here. 10.105.90, 10.105.94. Still bigger here on the average. Well, now let's take a look at the interest cost. 185.88, 185.94. The interest cost here is bigger, and again, 85.88, 85.94, bigger here. 92.58, 92.65, bigger here. 199.28, 199.36, 28.36, bigger here. 205, 206, so bigger here. Again, folks, that number 3 has a higher APR, 24%. That number 4 has a lower APR, 23.68. Let's see what's the difference. 24 minus 23.68. A difference of 0.32%. So the higher APR debt produces smaller interest cost. Because 185.88 is smaller than 185.94. $92.58 again is smaller than $92.65. $92.65 is bigger. $199.28 is smaller than $199.36. Again, $99.28, $99.36, bigger here. $205, $206, bigger here. Again, folks, higher APR debt has a lower or smaller interest cost. Smaller APR debt has a bigger interest cost. And again, if everything was equal, the higher APR will have a higher interest cost. But because these lenders are using different formulas, the higher APR has a smaller interest cost. Higher APR, smaller interest cost. Smaller APR, bigger or larger interest cost. Externally, they might refer to this one as maybe 3360. For also for Ambroise Method, whatever number that we use for the compound daily aspect, that's the number that we listed first. Okay, so that's why I keep saying internally and externally. Okay, you know, that way we don't confuse our helpers or our future financial coaches. You see that, America? Got all this different day count. Internally, 365, 365. 365, 365. No changes there. Internally, 365, 360. 360, 360. Not 365, 360, but 360, 360. 3 different ones. 365, 365. Same thing there. 365, 360. This one started out with 365. This one started out internally with 360. So, we have our competitor, that avalanche group. These folks, they like to attack the higher APR. For us over at Ambroise Method, we do not attack higher APR. We attack higher APR 99% of the time. But when we have knowledge that the higher APR not going to produce higher interest cost, then we attack the highest interest cost account. Remember, America, part of our slogan over at Ambroise Method is that Ambroise Method is a revolutionary debt repayment method that offers greater results in terms of reducing interest cost, not in terms of APR, in terms of reducing interest cost. It's the interest cost column that we are concerned about. Okay? Not the APR. When we have knowledge that the higher APR not going to produce highest interest cost. Okay? So that's one little edge that we have over at that avalanche group. Okay? One of many. Because these folks, they want to attack higher APR always. We don't attack higher APR always because we recognize, America, that a lot of time there are times when the higher APR again does not translate to higher interest cost. That is how, America, you reduce your interest cost when you're paying off debt, which is the standard, which is the barometer, which is the measuring stick. When you're paying off debt, okay, it is to attack whichever account produces highest interest cost, because that's where they're killing you, on the interest cost. Because remember, once the interest cost is gone, it's gone. Once the lender earned the interest cost on you, you will never get it back. Okay? Spirit of Father, thank you. All right, America, I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to continue with the exercise. All right, America. Now, here's some stuff on the board. So, America, on the last lesson, we talked about paycheck allocations. And on our method, we have 3 different types of paycheck allocation. We have what we call basic paycheck allocations. We have what we refer to as intermediate paycheck allocations. We have what we refer to as advanced paycheck allocation. And I only released to the general public the basic versions of our paycheck allocations. And we talked about how with the extra paycheck, you could decide to be with the extra paycheck for basic paycheck allocation. So with the extra paycheck, which is the third paycheck, you could decide to be any of those three things. Aggressive, you could look for greater liquidity, and that was on our last case study number 19. Or you could do some form of mix and match. Okay, folks? And on the aggressive, if you want to be aggressive with the extra paycheck, we say that we'll attack the higher APR. Let's say the extra paycheck was $1,000. Higher APR, or we attack the higher interest cost. Or we're doing something we refer to on our method as event priority. Okay, folks? That was on the last lesson with the extra paycheck. So, and we talked about how the higher APR doesn't always, when the higher APR doesn't translate to higher interest cost, then we attack the highest interest cost account. Okay? For example, say we're on day 30. This one yield 82.54, the higher APR ones. For day number 30, the account yields 82.85. That'll be debt number 1 here, and that'll be debt number 2 here. Okay? So, debt number 1, 10%. Debt number 2, 9.90%. Okay, folks? So, in a situation like that, the $1,000, let's assume, well, we have $10,000. So we'll send that $1,000, the extra paycheck. Remember, it's an extra paycheck. We'll do with it whatever we want. So that $1,000, America, will not go to debt number 1, because debt number 1 has the higher APR, but debt number 1 has the lowest interest cost. 82.54, if we're doing day number 30, 82.54, 82.85. Okay? So we'll send that $1,000 to debt number 2. Instead of debt number 1. Okay? With regards to the extra paycheck. Alright? Why? Again, because the higher APR does not translate to higher interest cost. The lower APR has the highest interest cost. 82.85 is higher than 82.54. Okay, folks? So, with the extra paycheck, when you're trying to be aggressive, remember it's an extra paycheck, you do with it whatever you want. You're trying to be aggressive, then you will not be attacking debt number 1. You will be attacking debt number 2 instead, which is the debt with the lower interest cost. APR. Okay? But since we are concerned about interest cost, that would be the debt to attack. Alright, folks? That's the difference. And again, that is one little edge that we have over debt avalanche amongst many. Okay? Now, earlier we talked about how different lenders using different formula Depends what type of product they're using. For example, you have some, if they're doing a loan, if they're lending you money on a consumer product, they might use one formula. If they're lending you money on a commercial product, they might be using a different kind of formula. That is why we have all those different formula on the board. Okay. And we have the same lender that could be doing both. Okay. Consumer product, for lack of a better term, that is product that's not related to a business. Commercial product, that's product for a business. Well, what does that mean exactly? Because remember again, folks, our government allowed these big banks, these big creditors to do whatever they want. Say, for example, I'm getting an HELOC, home equity line of credit. Because I'm getting an HELOC on my residential property, owner occupied. Let's call this one owner occupied. This HELOC, for them, for some lender, it might be a consumer product. Okay. So now let's assume I'm getting another HELOC, and because when I mention commercial product, I don't want you guys to think it's a full-blown business. So I'm getting another HELOC. This time it's on a small rental property, okay, that the client has. So let's put a small residential single family home, single family residence. Titled under personal name. Because I notice that sometimes folks are confused about this stuff. That's why I'm gonna briefly touch on it. The property, the rental property, passive income. That is being reported on my Schedule E. Okay? The rental property is titled under personal name. Okay. Single family residence. Okay. The first HELOC on the owner occupied, say they're using one formula. Say they're using 365, 365. Okay. Then I have another HELOC under my personal name, say James Ambroise. Owner occupied, James Ambroise. Residential rental, single family home, titled under my personal name, James Ambroise. Passive income that I reported on my Schedule E. This one, the bank, the lender treats this one as commercial product. Okay, so they might be using, say, 360 or 3360, because internally we refer to that one as 360. So our financial coaches doesn't get confused. Okay, but externally sometimes they refer to those things as different. Those day count convention as different things. Um, so going back to the consumer product and the commercial product, okay, owner occupied under my personal name, small residential rental property under my personal name. Okay, I'm getting an ELOC under my name. I'm getting an ELOC under my name. Okay, but because this one, I'm using this one to produce income, because remember it's a rental property, and I find a lender who's willing to give me a home equity line of credit on a rental property. Okay. This one, they might use that formula instead, the 360-day count one. Okay. Again, folks, internally, that's how we refer to them. Okay. I know some, externally, 30, 365, 30, but internally, that's how we refer to it. And again, so we do not get our folks confused. Okay. The first number that we use for the compounding daily, that's the number we listed first internally. All right, but anyways, going back to the consumer product and the commercial product, they both are ELOCs. Okay, ELOC and ELOC. Same lender. Let's assume this lender was, well, let's call it ABCD lender. ABCDEF lender is doing 2 home equity line of credit for me. But on one, they're using one formula. On another one, they're using a totally different formula. Okay? Both property are titled under my name. But the purpose for those properties are slightly different. Okay? So that's why they're using different formula. Between the same lender, but using different formula. ELOC, ELOC. So you might have 2 separate ELOC with one lender, but they're using different formula for those ELOCs. Okay? So I just want to briefly touch on that with you guys. So don't think when we're talking about commercial product, since don't go with commercial, people will start thinking about a full-blown business. Well, you could still have a passive income, still making passive income on a Schedule E, and the lender will treat it as a commercial product. Okay? It is in fact commercial product because you usually need to produce income. Okay? But sometimes because of the way those things are titled, okay, titled on their personal name, sometimes people get a little confused about why would a lender use one method on one product. They're both ELOCs. Why would they use one method for one ELOC on a totally separate formula on how they arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle for another ELOC? Okay? So that's why I wanted to briefly touch on that with you guys. All right, America, I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to continue with the exercise. All right, America. Now, so far we've been doing different day count. 365 days, 365 days, 360 days. Which is some of the ways that these lenders arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle. So now let's quickly do simple interest one. Say for this one, the simple interest, let's do simple interest. A lender, we're using just a simple interest. So 10,000 bucks times 10% divided by 12. 10,000 bucks times 10% divided by 12. So we are at 83.33. Let's do simple interest for this one. Simple interest. So this one is 10,000 bucks times 9.90%. If the beginning balance was 10,000. Divided by 12. Write it a little smaller. So we have simple interest. So we have 10,000 times 9.90% divided by 12. 10,000 times 9.90% divided by 12. We are at 82.50. Okay. That's the simple interest one. That's another formula that the lender could use. As you could see, 83.83. We don't have 83 as far as interest cost. We don't have 83.83 anywhere here. We have 77 all the way to 85, no 83s. We have 82.50 here. We don't have 82.50 anywhere here. 82.83, 82.84, 82.85, 82.86. Okay, that's a different formula. Okay. Then we have one more, the so-called rule of 78. Let me briefly touch on this rule of 78. Let me put it over here instead. This rule of 78, America, is another formula that the lender could use on how they arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle. This rule of 78, let me make my job a little easier. We're just going to do a quick one that covers 12 months. So we have month number 1, month number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. How do you arrive at this magic rule number 78? Okay. Say you have a loan with a term of 12 months. Okay. I'm just going to briefly touch on this rule of 78. So they'll add all the digit. So 12 months, month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They'll add all the digit. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12. When you add all this digit, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10, 11, 12. That's how you arrive at 78. Okay? Now, for month 1 is the formula that they use. For month 1, they use the number of months for the term, which is 12 months, divided by 78. Okay? Because remember, 78 was the so-called magic rule number. Okay? That's for month number 1. For month number 2, they're going to go in some kind of reverse order. So they're going to use 12 months, 11 months divided by 78. For month number 3, they're going to use 12, 11, 10 divided by 78. Okay? And so on and so forth. Some kind of reverse order. 12, 11, 10. Okay? And the denominator was when they add all the digits. That's how they arrive at the 78. Okay. Let's do a quick one. Let's pick this one, 10% at 10%, 10,000 bucks at 10%. So let me go to a quick calculator online to see what my total interest cost would be. 10,000 at 10% over 1 year term. $10,000 over 1 year term at 10%. Okay. So the total interest, 10,000 at 10% over a 12-month term. The total interest will be $549.91. Okay? That's the total interest over the life of the loan. And the monthly payment will be $879.16. Okay, that's on 10,000. Now, for this root of 78, America, the very first month, how much would the interest be? The second month, how much would the interest be? The third month, how much would the interest be? So they're going to use the total interest, $549.91, times $12.78 on the very first month. $549.91 times $12.78 times 12 divided by 78. So we are at $84.60. Okay? The second month, and again the total interest over the life of the loan, $549.91 times, this time 11.78. 11 divided by 78. This one will be for the second month, 77.54. 55. Let's do one more. Month 3, the total interest, $549.91. Times 10.78. Again, folks, over at Ambroise Method, We are a different kind of talent, folks, by the grace of God. 549.91 times 10 divided by 78. So we are at 70.50. Okay. That is for the so-called rule 78, rule of 78. Okay. And month 4, 9. So 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, some kind of reverse order. Okay. The last month will be 1 over 78. Okay. The 12th month. Now, let's take a look at the interest cost, 84.60 on the first month. Look at this one, 77.02. Okay. Now, this rule of 78, America, some states are putting some kind of restriction on it or trying to flat out ban that rule. Okay. T.I.L.A, which is the Truth in Lending Act. So the federal government trying to prohibit lenders from using this rule of 78 for loans that are longer than 61 months. That's according to T.I.L.A, the Truth in Lending Act. So you cannot use that one, this so-called rule of 78, if it's 61 months or longer. Okay? Can't use it. Okay? That's not allowed. Okay? If a lender trying to give you a loan that is where the term is longer, is 61 months or longer, they cannot use this rule of 78. Okay? That was for just 1 year. If it was 2 years, it'll be same thing, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all the way to 24. Then you're going to add all the digits. Okay? Three years, same thing, 1 all the way through 36. Then you're going to add all the digits to get this bottom number or the denominator. Okay? So if it was 2 years, then you'll start with 24 as the top number, because 2 years has 24 months. Then you work your way back. So 24, 23, 22, 21, 20. If it was a 3-year loan, okay, then the top number will be, for month 1, will be 36 months, because 3 times 12 is 36, and 36, 35, 30, 34, 33, 32. You work your way back, okay? Month 1 will be 36 for a 3-year month. So the denominator will be a different number than 78. It'll be 1 plus 2 all the way to 78. And you're going to add all the digits to get the bottom number or the denominator. Okay? All right. So that's to quickly touch on this rule of 78. Okay? Our federal government banned it for a loan that is longer than 61 months. Okay? So which means now, these lenders, they're not stupid, America. They know they cannot go over 61 months. So what do you think they're gonna do? They're gonna stay under 61 months. So they'll give you loan for 3 years, 36 months. 36 months is under 61. They'll give you loan for 4 years, that's 48 months. They'll give you loan for 5 years, that's 60 months. Okay? So, our government trying to put some kind of restriction on it, but they do not go far enough, because they crank it up all the way to 61 months. So it's easy to see, America, that our government, it seems, is colluding with the big bank, the big creditors. Why are they doing it for 61 months? If you're gonna bend the rule, okay, ban it. don't allow them to use it for loans for loans that are shorter than 61 months. Okay. Our government and the big bank, the big creditors, it seems like they're working in concert with each other. They're working in conjunction with each other. How you gonna ban a silly rule, but you only do it, you only prohibit it for loans that are 61 months or longer? And again, folks, those lenders, they're gonna stay under 61 months. Okay, the one that wants to use this rule of 78. Again, some states try to ban it. Okay, and some states follows the same guidelines as the government. Since T.I.L.A established this rule where you cannot use it for loan 61 months, some states, they follow the same guideline. Okay. Now, just to be transparent, if you plan on keeping the product or whatever loan that you have with them or whatever product that you have with them all the way through the duration of the loan term. For example, we have this one, the simple interest. It was also 1 year. Let's go right here. It was also 1 year. The simple interest one. The total interest cost will be similar to if you had simple interest. The total interest cost for this wood of 78 would be similar so I don't confuse you guys. Say 10%, 10,000 at 10% over a 1 year term. So you have a loan for 1 year. The total interest on the simple interest one will be 549, about 549.91. And for this rule of 78 on $10,000 at 10% over 1 year, the total interest will be a similar number. Due to rounding, maybe it might change, but it should be 549.91. Okay. So as you could see, for a lender who is using simple interest, for another lender who is using this rule of 78, to be transparent now, the total on $10,000 at 10% for 1 year. Let me run my number one more time. 10,000 549.91. Due to rounding, you might have like 549.92. Okay. So as you could see, the total interest is similar, either this one or that one. Due to rounding, you might be slightly off. Okay. So whether a lender is using a simple interest or a lender is using this rule of 78, the total interest is about the same. So the total interest is similar. Simple interest, the total interest, 549.91. Rule of 78, the total interest, if you're gonna keep the loan throughout for the life of, throughout the whole duration, throughout 12 months, the total interest will still be the same, 549.91 or 549.92, okay, due to rounding, okay? So it's similar, folks. If you plan on keeping the loan for 12 months, that means you keep making this $879.16 for 12 months. You do not send any extra payment. You do not do anything like that. Now, the second America that you decide to make extra payments, then all of a sudden, this rule of 78 is not as beneficial as the simple interest one. Okay. So let me erase some stuff so I could break this thing down a little further. This rule of 78, America, is good and bad. If you plan on keeping the loan for the entire term, this rule of 78, the result on the total interest cost is the same as if you had a simple interest. In this example, $549.91 for simple interest, $549.91 for this rule of 78. Now, the second that you plan on paying the loan early. So in this example, we're using a 12-month term. Say, for example, you plan on paying the loan in month number 5. You want to send them a large payment to knock out the loan. All of a sudden now, this rule of 78 is not good. Okay? Now, when you're paying off debt, America, of course, you're not going to try to babysit the debt throughout the duration of the loan term. Okay? You want to pay it early. So for that reason, this rule of 78 is bad, because we're going to try to knock out whatever debt what we have a little bit longer than the actual term. If it's the term is 12 months, we're trying to knock it out before 12 months. Okay? So, depends on the context. This rule of 78 might be good, it might be bad. If you plan on keeping the loan all the way throughout the duration of the term, well, the results is the same as a simple interest loan, or as a loan that uses a simple interest formula. But they only penalize you when you're trying to pay it early, when you're trying to pay off the loan early. Okay? And the refund or the rebate that you'll get, because they collect so much up front. Look at this one, $84.60. This one was only $77.02. Okay? The second month, $77.55. The third month, $70.50. So in 3 months, they've already collected $84.77. They have already collected all these amounts. Okay? So, say for example, you're at on a 12-month loan, you're in month number 6, for example, and you're trying to pay it off month number 6. Okay. The interest that you've already paid, since you're in the halfway mark, you would think that the interest will be halfway. Say $549.91. $549.91 divided by 2. $274.96, for example, which is the halfway mark. But this rule of 78, America, after 6 months, instead of paying just 50%, because remember, it's a 12-month loan. So you would think 6 months, you're only going to pay 50% of the interest. No. Depends on the balance and the interest rate. After 6 months, you probably already paid a percentage that is higher than 50%. For example, yours could be, I don't know, 65, 70, 75%. Depends on the example. 80% even. Depends on the example. So after 6 months, it's not going to be 50% of the total interest, or $274.96. Let's assume after 6 months it's 75%, because we're just freestyling with it. So 549.91 times 75%. So we are at 412. 43. Okay. See? Remember, they're penalizing you for trying to pay the loan early. So under a regular scenario, halfway mark should have been somewhere around halfway as far as interest. But for this root of 78, halfway mark, you've already paid more than about 75. Well, it depends on the example. You know, I didn't actually run it, so I don't know the actual percentage. But let's assume it's like 75%. So halfway mark, you didn't just pay half of the interest. You pay more than half of the interest. You pay about 75%. Okay? Assuming that's what it is, depends on the example. So just to give you an idea about this root of 78, if you try to keep the loan again throughout the duration of the term, it is your total interest cost will be similar as the simple interest. But the second you're trying to pay it off early, they're gonna penalize you because you're gonna end up paying a much higher interest cost than what it would have been if it was a simple interest. Okay, America? I hope that I break this thing down in a way that you guys could understand. All right, America, I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to continue with the exercise. All right, America. Now, again, this lesson is us going into greater details when the higher APR does not translate to higher interest cost. Okay. So far, for interest cost, the lender could use the average daily balance method. They could use the previous balance method. They could use an adjusted balance method. They could use simple interest. A lender could use interest that includes compounding. A lender could use an interest that does not include compounding, so non-compounding. They could use this so-called root of 78. And they could use different day count convention. Okay. Let's count them real quick, America. The average daily balance, that's 1. The previous balance method, that's another formula that they could use. That's 2. Adjusted balance method, that's another formula a bank could use. That's 3. Simple interest, that's 4. They could use as part of how they arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle, they could use compounding, that's 5. They could use non-compounding, that's 6. They could use rule of 78, that's 7. They could use different day count convention. For example, internally we refer to this one, well, let's just put 360, 365 on the common year and 366 in the leap year. So that's 8. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. With multiple variations on this one. Okay. And as you could see, America, our government allowed these big banks, these big creditors to do whatever they want. Look at how many different ways. At least there are more, because, I don't want this lesson to be too long. I was not going to cover every single one of them. Again, so far we arrive at 8. And there are even more. Some of them I'm not even aware of. Because again, our government allowed these big banks, these big creditors to do whatever they want. Okay, I put on the board the most common ones, like the average, average daily balance, simple interest, compounding, rule of 78, and the day counts. Okay? Folks, why would our government allow the big bank, the big creditors to use all those different formulas on how they arrive at the interest cost for the cycle? And again, folks, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's just the main ones. And inside each one, there are more variations, like this day count conventions. Over here, we've done at least 3. So inside this one, there's at least 3. So that's 8, 9, 10. So our government of America allowed the big bank, the big creditors to have at least 10 options on how they charge us interest. At least. There are more. Those are the ones that are, I guess, more common. At least 10. So no wonder why, figuring out interest costs is so difficult. Look at how many different ways, different formula a lender could use. And they're under no obligations, okay, to use this one. They're under no obligations to use that one. They're under no obligations to use this one, which means they could use any and all of them. Whichever one they want to use, they could use it. So long they tell you, the consumer, oh, it's a consumer product, or it's a commercial product. They could pick any of those 10s. At least 10. You see how complex paying off debt is? Because first you have to figure out what type of formula they're using on how they arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle. Again, folks, beautiful Congress allow the big bank, the big creditors to be doing this nonsense. Dude, it's just interest cost, man. Okay? Why do you have so many ways on how you arrive at the interest cost for the cycle? I have at least 10. Meanwhile, we have my competitor, the folks over at Velocity Banking Group. They're doing one doing divided by 2. Another faction's doing divided by 3. on how they arrive at their average. This formula, at least the most common ones, with average daily balance is very common. Simple interest, compounding interest, root of 78, and the day count. Do you see divided by 2 anywhere here when we are doing this exercise? Do you see divided by 3 anywhere here when we are doing this exercise? Because these folks, they have current balance, interest rate, daily rate. Talking about my competitor, well, one of the factions over at Velocity Banking Group. And they have the income comes in. Then they have interest rate. I'm just doing a summary because I cover all these items extensively from past lessons, past case studies, folks. Interest rate, daily rate. Then they have expense going up, interest rate, daily rate. This group that is divided by 3, so they take this results here, 1, 2, 3. So since they have 3 items, they do divided by 3. You have this other factions doing divided by 2, so they do current balance. And at some point, as part of the formula, they have income coming in. And the results for from those two, whatever the income was, they're doing divided by 2. Okay, and again, we're just doing a summary because I'm not gonna go over this whole thing again. I've already covered that, especially this one from our past lesson, past case studies. Okay, so those different factions doing divided by 2, divided by 3. I'm talking about my competitor over at Velocity Banking Group. Meanwhile, these are some of the most common ones that the actual lenders, the actual creditors are using. Okay. Earlier, when we were doing 365, we did not do divided by 2. We did not do divided by 3. Because these folks, they're using an average on top of another average. Not only that, when they say current balance, income coming in, you don't even know what day in the cycle the income comes in. Does the income comes in on day 1 of the cycle? Or day 31 of the cycle? When did the income comes in? And the expense, same thing. The expense comes in on day 1 of the cycle? Or day 31 of the cycle? Depends how many days the cycle has. So with these folks, as you know, the folks over at Velocity Banking Group, they are misinformed. So they kept saying income comes in, expenses goes out, but you don't know what day in the cycle income comes in. Okay? Is it day 1? Is it day 28, day 29, day 30, day 31? From 1 all the way through 31. Depends how many days the cycle has. Okay? These folks, they are misinformed, so they do not take into account any of those items. Okay? That's why sometimes the results are all over the place. I'm talking about my competitor over at Velocity Banking Group. Okay? They're just doing their own thing, man. These people are totally misinformed. Okay? The lenders, even though our government allow them to do this kind of nonsense, okay? These folks here started their own formula, totally different than what the government allowed the big bank, the big creditors to do. Divided by 2 to how they arrive at an average, divided by 3 on how they arrive at an average. There goes the average. And again, earlier we had divided by 2 anywhere. We didn't have that divided by 2 nowhere. We did not have this divided by 3 nowhere. Okay? So, my point is, because the folks over at Velocity Banking Group is not taking into account some of the more pertinent top items, like how many number of days, the proper way to calculate interest, the proper way to calculate average daily balance. Okay, the numbers will be all over the place. Okay. Now, going back to the different ways that our government allow the big bank, the big creditors to to compute interest cost. It's easy to see how complex this thing can be. Okay. Meanwhile, we have the folks over at that snowball group talking about the way to pay off debt is to attack the lowest balance. Put that over here. That snowball, lowest balanced. Are they taking into account all these different variations? Again, folks, when you're paying off debt, it's the interest cost that matters, unless you do an even priority on an account. Okay? Not the lowest balance. Not only that, a lot of times the lowest balance account is on a low APR. So this folks gonna force you to pay more interest for no reason. Okay. In addition, these folks, they're only taking advantage of cash flow. Remember, when you're paying off debt, you're gonna come across three main elements, three main assignments, three main jobs, which is transfer, alternative account, and cash flow. They're only taking advantage of cash flow. So they're not turning in all the assignments, all the elements, all the jobs. Same thing with that avalanche. That avalanche wants to attack the higher APR. And earlier we proved to you guys that the higher APR doesn't always translate to higher interest costs. Look at this one. 82.54 is smaller than 82.85. Look at this one. 205.99 is smaller than 206. Not only that, they're not taking advantage of transfer. They're not taking advantage of the alternative account. They're only taking advantage of cash flow, just like that snowball. So these two groups, America, they do not go far enough in eliminating debt quickly. And finally, we have this confused bunch called Velocity Banking Group. Income comes in, expenses goes out. You don't know when the income comes in. What day of the cycle did the income comes in? Is it day number 1, day number 2, day number 3, day number 4, day number 5, or day number 30, or day number 31? Expense goes out. You don't know what day in the cycle the expense goes out. Because why? These folks, they like to use an overall average. You know? So that's why a lot of times they overstated their performance, they overstated their results. Especially this group doing divided by 2. Because this group doesn't even take into account the expense. They only take into account the income. And like we mentioned from past lessons, this one is a better group. Okay? Still wrong because they're not doing things properly. Okay? You cannot create your own formula like we mentioned from past lessons. And you have to let people know when the income comes in and when the expense goes out. Because in a cycle, you could have all the way to 31 days in a cycle. Okay? And another thing with Velocity Banking Group, Say we have, because these folks, they're going to want you to get an ELOC PLOC, okay, to go acquire ELOC PLOC. Say you went ahead and acquired ELOC PLOC. Right now, you might get an ELOC, say at 8%. That's a 9%. Or ELOC or a PLOC. These people, let's assume you have a credit card on the board. Let's say you have a personal loan on the board at 2.65%. They're going to want you to dump all the income into the PLOC. So dump all income. So you have a mortgage at 2.65% because back in 2021 the rate was that low. Yeah, 2020 or 2021, I believe it was 2021. Say you have a personal loan on the board at 29%. They still want you to dump all the income onto the ELOC. Say you have a credit card at 28%. And again, they're going to want you to dump all of the payment. Let's say we still have the ELOC or PLOC at 9%. They still want you to dump all of the income onto the ELOC or the PLOC. Say on the board you have another credit card and you are taking advantage of some type of promotional period. Say it's 1.99%. America, it doesn't matter. They're still going to want you to dump all the income onto the ELOC or the PLOC. So no matter what you have on the board, you have other account at 2%, they're going to dump all the income into the PLOC. You have another account at 29%, they're going to dump all of their income into the PLOC. Another example, you have a credit card at 1.99%, they're going to dump all of the income onto the PLOC, ELOC or PLOC. You have another credit card at 28%, they're going to want you to dump all of the income onto the ELOC, PLOC. So no matter what the example is on the board, 2%, let's dump all the income onto ELOC, PLOC. 29%, let's dump all the income onto ELOC, PLOC. 1.99%, let's dump all the income into ELOC, PLOC. 28%, let's dump all of the income into ELOC, PLOC. America, this is equivalent of madness. You cannot keep dumping all of the income into ELOC, PLOC, no matter what the example is on the board. Whether we have a considerably lower APR on the board, they're going to dump it onto the ELOC. Whether we have a considerably higher APR on the board, they're going to dump it onto the ELOC. No matter what the example is on the board, these people, they don't care. They're going to want you to dump all of your income onto the ELOC, PLOC. 2% doesn't matter. ELOC, PLOC. 29% doesn't matter. ELOC, PLOC. 1.99% doesn't matter. ELOC, PLOC. 28% doesn't matter. ELOC, PLOC. Okay. And again, folks, this is equivalent to madness. These people, they never like to run the numbers at all. Okay. Not only we have all this nonsense that the government, our government allowed the big bank, the big creditors to do, and how they arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle, but you have this group the way they pay off debt is to always dump all of the income onto an ELOC, PLOC. Folks, that is not how you pay off debt. This is why this debt repayment method, they will never ever be able to compete with us, because we take into account all the different variations, okay? Regardless how or what type of formula a lender or creditor uses, okay? We take that into consideration, okay? Not only that, the very first two groups, they don't go far enough in eliminating debt quickly, okay? They're only taking advantage of cash flow, okay? Now, all the so-called financial gurus of America, the way they pay off debt, a lot of times these guys, they don't follow that snowball, they follow that avalanche. I'm talking about the so-called personal finance gurus, because for them, they recognize that the higher APR is the way to go. Okay? But one mistake that they've made is that they forgot that sometimes the higher APR doesn't always translate to higher interest cost. Smaller interest costs, bigger interest costs. Smaller interest costs, at least 3 places, bigger interest costs. Higher APR, lower APR. So the higher APR doesn't always translate to higher interest cost. Okay, folks? And these people, again, they like to, some folks like to refer to them as personal finance gurus. Okay? They need to stop and think about all the different ways that a lender could arrive at the monthly interest cost for the cycle. Okay? So you're not always going to be attacking the higher APR. Okay? These people, they didn't take that into account. Okay? Because some of them, they belongs to that avalanche group to where they're going to want you to attack higher APR always. Well, we just proved to you earlier that the higher APR does not always produce higher interest cost. Okay, folks? All right, America, I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to continue with the exercise. Now, America, remember when you're paying off debt, the standard is to attack whichever account produces highest interest cost. That's why they're killing you on the interest cost. Not to attack lowest balance, like the folks over at Debt Snowball want you to believe. Not to attack higher APR, because 99% of the time, the higher APR is higher interest cost, but not always. And certainly not to dump all of your income into an ELOC when we have considerably higher APR on the board, or considerably lower APR on the board. Okay? So, let's take a look at the difference. For this one, let's do a few of them. 30 days was 82.54. 30 days here was 82.85. Let's see, 82.54 minus 82.85. 82.85. We're talking about these two. 30 days here, 30 days there. 82.85 minus 82.54. Let's see what the difference is. 54.80, that's like 31, but let's just run it. 82.85 minus 82.54. Okay, so 0.31 cent. Okay, let's do this one. 205.99, 206.07. 206.07 for the 31-day one. 205.99. 205.99. Assuming everything is equal, so we have an apples to apples comparison. So 206.07 minus 205.99. Okay, so we are at 0.08. Okay. Now, some of you might be saying, well, James, the difference is only 31 cents or 0.31. The difference is only 8 cents or 0.08. Okay. That's when the number of days is the same. Okay. Let's say if it was this one, 79.78 and 82.85. Let's do one more. Let's do when the number of days is different. 82.85 so on day 30 here, let's say the other lender was using day number 29, because remember, between two lenders they don't always have the same number of days in a cycle between two lenders. Okay, one lender might be using 30 days for their cycle, another lender might be using 29 days on their cycle. Okay, for a given month, for a given period, say 79.78. Let's see what the difference is here. 82.85 minus 79.78. So now we are at $3.07. Okay. Now, America, reason why I want to do this little exercise, the difference is not something for you to lose sleep over. The difference is very minimal. 31 cents, 8 cents. Well, this one is quite substantial, $3.07. Okay? Between if a lender is using one formula, if another lender is using a totally different formula. Okay? So it's only a few cents. And again, not something for you to lose sleep over. Okay? Well, this $3 is quite substantial because you could get could go to a fast food restaurant and get a meal with this $3.07. Okay? But, America, what you fail to realize is that, let's assume that these lenders have that product on 6 million customers or 6 million clients. And that's when it makes a difference now. Okay? Let's see what the result's gonna be. So we got 6 million times 0.31. One. Let's do this one. 6 million customer, and they're making that difference they're getting an additional 0.08 cents. And let's do this one. 6 million, $3.07 extra. You see? Just a slight variations, America, between if a lender choose one formula over a different formula, times the number of clients that they might have, okay? Whether it's 6 million, whether it's 1 million, whether it's 500,000, you know, the number of clients is irrelevant, but let's assume it was 6 million. 31 cents at 6 million client, that's 1,860,000 bucks. 6 million clients that they're charging this difference 0.08 cents, that's $480,000. 6 million, $3.07 per client that they have this product on. Okay, they're charging this difference in interest cost. 18,420,000 bucks. As you could see, they could make a lot of money. Even if the difference from one formula to another formula is only a few cents. Look at this one, 480,000. Look at that one, 1,860,000 bucks. Look at this one, 18,420,000. 420,000. My point is just a small increase on how much interest cost that they are charging you will make them a lot of money. Depends how many customers that they have on that particular product. Okay? And again, it doesn't represent much, just 31 cents per cycle, 0.08 cents per cycle, $3.07 per cycle. Depends, you know, which section we compare with the other. Okay? So, since the 0.08 is the smallest one, okay, let's do worst case scenario, 0.08. Well, what's that? 480,000 bucks that they're making. For somebody like us who's living paycheck to paycheck, imagine if we could put our hands on that kind of money. This is how much money a big bank, the big creditors could be making per cycle. Not per year, folks. Per cycle. Whether the cycle is 28 days, 29 days, 30 days, 31 days. It's a lot of money. And again, folks, our government is colluding with the big bank, the big creditors, so they allow them to do whatever they want. And these guys, they're pretty slick. Okay? You know, a lot of times, they're going to pick the formula that's going to produce the highest interest cost for them. Okay? Unless there's some kind of restriction, like this rule of 78. Okay? There's a restrictions to where you cannot go any higher than 61 months. Okay? And some states trying to impose further restrictions on top of the federal guideline. The T.I.L.A. Truth and Lending Act. Alright, folks? Alright, America, I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to continue with the exercise. Alright, America. I think that's it for me today. Again, my name is James Ambroise. I am the author, creator of Ambroise Method 1.0 and Ambroise Method 2.0. Ambroise Method is a revolutionary debt repayment method that offers greater results in terms of reducing interest cost compared to debt snowball, debt avalanche, velocity bank. Thank you, Jesus. Until next time, America. Good morning.